Never touch anything caught in the traps of Blackwood. The town elders said they were demons, but they were wrong. The real demons wear police badges, sit on the town council, and feed on human flesh for eternal life. You saved my life, Lucas, but my bite on your arm, it just made you a target for this entire town. Run. The town of Blackwood sat heavily, isolated deep within the permanently snow-capped mountain ranges of Oregon. Year-round, the region was choked by a suffocating canvas of white frost and ancient, densely packed pine forests that wrapped around the borders like natural, ominous fortress walls. The air here was constantly oppressive, damp, and thick with the heavy scent of isolation. The locals of Blackwood were an insular breed, embodying the rigid, conservative traits of a small American town, a place where everyone knew your face, but everyone buried a dark secret behind closed doors. Lucas was an 18-year-old high schooler with a sharp, hollow jawline, a quiet demeanor, and eyes that harbored a profound, echoing grief. His parents had vanished early in his childhood, lost to a mysterious, unexplained accident deep in the wilderness, leaving Lucas to grow up under the cold neglect and ostracization of the townspeople. He chose survival through isolation, working late-night shifts at a local sawmill to put food on his table. His appearance carried the raw, rugged edge of a mountain child, a faded, moss-green hunting jacket, rough hands heavily calloused from labor, and a small hatchet habitually strapped to his hip. On one particular winter night, a catastrophic blizzard slammed into Blackwood. As Lucas was trudging through knee-deep snow along the perimeter of the Forbidden Woods to inspect the sawmill's fence line, a sudden metallic clank sliced through the storm, followed closely by a faint, agonizing whimper. Curiosity piqued. Lucas pushed aside the heavy, snow-laden pine branches and froze dead in his tracks, trapped mercilessly within the jaws of a gargantuan, rusted steel bear trap was a creature of borderline impossible beauty, a silver fox. Its sleek coat shimmered with an ethereal, silvery gray glaze, looking like woven threads of pure frost under the beam of his flashlight. But there was a sinister anomaly. This was no ordinary hunting trap. Etched into the thick steel jaws were chaotic, ancient occult symbols glowing with a faint, blood-red luminescence, violently draining the life force out of the creature. The fox did not lash out or growl in blind panic. Instead, it slowly lifted its slender head, locking its clear, amber eyes directly onto Lucas. That single gaze carried in profound intelligence, a raw, aching despair so palpable it made Lucas's chest tighten. In the animal's absolute solitude, he saw his own. Without a second thought, Lucas dropped his flashlight into the snow and lunged down beside the creature. He dug his bare fingers into the mechanical steel teeth of the trap, pouring every ounce of his strength into tearing them open. The violent recoil of the heavy spring mechanism was brutal. The razor-sharp metal sliced a deep, jagged gash across Lucas's wrist, sending hot, crimson blood spraying onto the frozen snow. Gritting his teeth through the searing pain, he let out a guttural roar and forced the steel jaws apart. The silver fox was free. It didn't bolt immediately. Before vanishing into the dense, creeping fog, the creature stepped closer and gently licked the bleeding wound on his wrist. A soft, soothing wave of neon blue light erupted from its tongue. The agonizing pain vanished instantly. The shredded flesh knit itself back together in a matter of seconds, leaving behind nothing but a small, faint white scar in the distinct shape of a miniature fox crown. The silver fox dissolved into the mist, leaving behind only a single, frosted silver feather-like fur shimmering on the freezing earth. The following morning, Blackwood High School was submerged in the damp, biting chill of winter frost. Every ounce of attention from the local students shifted entirely toward a new transfer student just stepping through the classroom door, Skylar. She possessed a haunting, otherworldly beauty that stood in stark contrast to the typical mountain girls of the region. Her platinum blonde hair was cut into a sharp shoulder-length bob, highlighting flawless, porcelain skin as white as untouched snow. But what made everyone hold their breath were her eyes, a striking, burning amber, deep and hypnotic, as if harboring a mystical fire. Skylar's aura was cold, detached, and wrapped in an invisible, crushing pressure that warned anyone from daring to approach her. Phasing out the whispers and curious stares of the male students, Skylar scanned the room until her gaze locked onto Lucas's seat at the back corner of the class. Without a word of explanation, she walked straight over, pulled out the chair, and sat down right next to him. Lucas felt an involuntary shiver run down his spine as a pure, crisp scent of winter snowflakes and ancient wilderness drifted from her. He glanced down at his wrist. The fox-crown scar suddenly throbbed, radiating a sharp, blossoming heat. Skylar paid no attention to her textbooks. Her amber eyes were fixed entirely on the scar on his hand, with a deeply complex expression. Following that day, the town of Blackwood began to warp into something deeply sinister. The locals whispered rumors of a bizarre affliction dubbed the melancholic sleeping syndrome. Seasoned hunters vanished mysteriously into the night, one after another. When the town's search parties finally discovered them at the deep edges of the woods, they were nothing but withered, desiccated husks, as if their entire blood and life force had been aggressively vacuumed out through tiny puncture wounds on their necks. A wave of hysteria gripped the community. Sheriff Miller, a tall, imposing middle-aged man with a dignified square jawline who always flashed a comforting smile to the public, placed the entire town under an absolute curfew after 8 p.m. Late one evening, after finishing an overtime shift at the sawmill, Lucas trudged his way home along a narrow trail, cutting through the old-growth pine forest. The silence was deafening, the sound of his boots crunching against the heavy snow echoing with a dry, hollow crispness. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a thick fog rolled in, dense enough to completely swallow the flickering, dim light of the street lamps. Rustle. Rustle. A bizarre sound scraped from behind the heavy brush. Lucas stopped dead in his tracks, his hand gripping the small hatchet at his hip. From the depths of the fog, a deformed creature lunged out. It had once been a local hunter, but its body was now completely mutated by a dark, mist-dwelling demon. Its teeth had grown into jagged, protruding fangs. Razor-sharp claws ripped through its leather gloves, and its eyes rolled back into a lifeless, predatory white. The monster unleashed a frenzied roar, charging directly at Lucas with terrifying velocity. Lucas raised his hatchet to defend himself, but the creature's raw strength was overwhelming. It violently deflected the weapon, pinning him hard into the freezing snow, its claws embedding deep into his shoulders. In that split second between life and death, just as the blood-soaked maw of the beast was about to sink into Lucas's neck, a white blur violently erupted from the fog. It was Skylar. Her face was stripped of its usual calm composure. Her amber eyes burned like dual torches in the pitch-black night, her pupils violently constricting into sharp, vertical predator slits. Boom! Boom! A colossal wave of psychic pressure detonated from Skylar's body, forcing the mist monster to recoil in terror. Right behind her, beneath the dim moonlight, Lucas watched in absolute horror as a massive, phantom silhouette materialized, a majestic, nine-tailed snow fox, forged of ice, curling its body and baring its supreme fangs. Skylar extended her slender hand, curling her fingers tightly. Instantly, the dark blood pumping inside the monster's veins froze completely solid. She stepped forward, stomping her boot hard onto the snow. A sweeping shockwave of pure frost decimated the area, turning the entire body of the demon-possessed hunter into an eternal ice statue before it shattered into 100 jagged shards, raining over the ground. Lucas lay stunned, staring at the girl before him, his ragged gasps turning into plumes of white winter steam. Skylar slowly turned her head, her amber eyes gradually bleeding back to normal. She leaned down close to the trembling boy, her voice dropping into a freezing whisper. "You saved my life in the woods, Lucas. But my bite on your arm, it just activated the blood covenant. You are my anchor now, and that makes you a target for this entire town. Run before they find you." The blizzard outside seemed to howl with an escalating fury. Yet inside the ice cavern, hidden deep behind the eternal shroud of Blackwood Valley's frozen waterfall, the silence was so absolute that the rhythmic dripping of blood echoed like a ticking clock. A faint, neon blue luminescence radiating from the icy stalactites illuminated Skylar's face, casting long, haunting shadows on the cavern walls. She stood with her back to Lucas, her platinum blonde hair swaying gently in the localized glacial draft. "You want to know what I am, don't you, Lucas?" Skylar asked, slowly turning around. Her amber eyes no longer burned with the predatory ferocity she used to slaughter the mist creature. Instead, they were crystalline, reflecting a millennium of absolute solitude. "My people call this the nine-tailed snow fox, the snow kitsune. We crossed the ocean and set foot on these North American mountains over 300 years ago, long before the so-called founding fathers built this rotten town." Lucas leaned his back against the freezing rock wall, clutching his still oozing shoulder. He looked straight into her eyes, harboring no rejection. Only the profound empathy shared between two abandoned souls. So those desiccated corpses in the woods, that was your doing? No. Skylar snapped, her predatory pupils violently constricting. Those are the bite marks of an insatiable thirst for immortality. My enemies, and now yours, are not natural monsters. They call themselves the Iron Order. Skylar stepped closer to Lucas, her slender fingers tracing the air just above the fox-crowned scar on his wrist. A soothing wave of comfort immediately washed over him, numbing the searing pain in his shoulder. With a gentle surge of her divine consciousness, she released a fragment of her memory, plunging Lucas's mind into a dark vortex of history. He saw the first settlers arriving in America during the 17th century, men carrying fanatical devotion and rusted iron blades. They had discovered the primordial energy of the glacial ley lines running directly beneath the town of Blackwood, the very sanctuary the Fox clan had guarded for generations. They do not hunt demons for righteousness, Skylar's voice echoed heavily within Lucas's mind. They hunt my kind to harvest our fox cores. When our blood and cores are refined alongside ancient, forbidden occult rituals, they create an elixir of bone-shifting transmutation, a serum that grants mere mortals immortality and absolute power. The entire elite class, the very monsters who founded this town council, have sustained their wretched lives on that blood-stained serum for centuries. Lucas snapped back to reality, a jolt of horror striking his core. Fleeting memories flashed in his mind. The dignified, righteous face of Sheriff Miller, the deceitful smile of the prestigious mayor, and even the prying, sinister gaze of his eccentric high school history teacher. All the leading figures governing Blackwood, the very hypocrites who used to dish out fake pity to an orphan like him, turned out to be blood-sucking demons masquerading as gods. The baying of a mutated pitch-black hound pack with blood-red eyes echoed violently, shattering the nighttime silence of the forest. Lucas and Skylar burst out of the ice cavern, plunged into a life-or-death survival horror sprint beneath the bone-chilling cold. High-powered spotlights from police pickup trucks swept through the ancient pine trees, cutting the darkness to ribbons. They're moving faster than I anticipated, Skylar breathed heavily, sprinting while dragging Lucas along. Behind them, the sharp whistling of tearing wind hissed through the air. Spellbound arrows and silver bullets erupted from the hunting rifles of the iron-masked enforcers, cloaked as night hunters. One arrow grazed Lucas's cheek, burying itself into a nearby tree trunk, instantly corroding the wood fibers with a deadly hiss of violet smoke. They were cornered, driven straight to the edge of a precipitous cliff overlooking the frozen abyss of the valley's waterfall. Out of the dense, swallowing fog, blazing torches materialized. Leading the pack was Sheriff Miller. In his hands was no ordinary service pistol, but a massive, ancient crossbow forged of dark iron and wrapped in barbed chains. His usually dignified face was now grotesque, twisted into a mask of pure, insatiable greed as his eyes locked onto Skylar's white coat. The game of hide-and-seek is over. Skylar, Miller barked with a booming laugh, his voice echoing against the roaring blizzard. And you too, Lucas. To think you survived that accident 12 years ago, because this wretched beast licked your life back together. You should be grateful. Today, you're helping the Order finalize the biggest harvest of the decade. Miller raised the heavy crossbow, aiming dead at Lucas's heart. In the split second his finger squeezed the trigger, Skylar did not hesitate. She lunged forward, throwing her body in front of him. The spell-infused arrow, dragging its heavy barbed chains, ripped entirely through Skylar's shoulder, pinning her violently into the stone ground. Fresh, vibrant crimson blood burst forth, staining the pristine white snow beneath her. Skylar collapsed to her knees, unleashing an agonizing, gut-wrenching scream. The ancient iron chains instantly took effect, locking down her celestial fox energy, forcing her snowtails, which had just begun to materialize, to aggressively, violently retract. The iron-masked guards swarmed her, overpowering and dragging Skylar away as she fought back helplessly. Miller stepped over, slamming his heavy leather boot onto Lucas's chest, just as the boy tried to crawl back up. The sheriff looked down at him with absolute, freezing contempt. Thanks for leading the way, orphan boy. Now lie still and freeze to death. They withdrew into the fog, leaving Lucas entirely alone, abandoned in the heart of a raging blizzard that was slowly consuming his body. Yet even as consciousness faded, the echoing, soul-shattering cries of Skylar screaming his name from the direction of the town still ringed violently in his ears. The blood moon breached the rugged Oregon peaks, bleeding a dense, suffocating crimson luminescence across the town of Blackwood. At the absolute heart of the town, inside the classified underground crypt, beneath the towering, ancient stone cathedral, the air reeked of melting candle wax, suffocatingly fused with the metallic stench of iron rust. Skylar hung suspended over a massive stone altar, anchored by 4 heavy barbed wire chains driven deep into the bedrock. Her pristine, snow-white skin was now cross-hatched with violent purple contusions, her blood dripping rhythmically from her slender shoulders into a gargantuan bronze cauldron bubbling intensely below. Surrounding the altar, dozens of Iron Order cultists, cloaked in midnight black robes and hidden behind faceless iron masks, chanted a droning, ancient Latin liturgy in perfect, horrifying unison. The low hum of their voices warped the atmosphere, suffocating the very air in Skylar's lungs as the fox core inside her chest began to compress, its intense amber glow visibly radiating through her flesh. The massive thick oak doors of the crypt were violently blasted off their hinges. Lucas stepped out from the encroaching shadows, his entire body battered and bloodied from the blizzard and the brutal cliffside fall. In his hands, there were no silver weapons, no sacred occult charms, only a razor-sharp iron firefighting axe scavenged from the sawmill. The 18-year-old orphan's gaze held no remaining trace of fear. It was entirely hollowed out, harboring the dead-eyed, volatile frenzy of a man with absolutely nothing left to lose. The feral brat isn't frozen solid yet. Sheriff Miller scoffed, standing adjacent to the cauldron as he slowly unsheathed a silver short sword. Apprehend him. 4 iron-masked enforcers, wielding executioner axes, charged directly at Lucas. Lucas ducked beneath a vertical axe swing, leveraging his momentum to violently drive the blunt spine of his hatchet into the helmet latch of the lead guard, sending him collapsing hard onto the stone floor. He fought like a cornered animal, relying purely on a mountain hunter's survival instincts, trading a deep, jagged slash across his forearm and suffocating blows to his chest to keep moving forward. Lucas collapsed directly at the base of the stone altar, his breath heavy and ragged, crimson blood streaming down his forehead and blurring his vision. Miller stepped forward, systematically and mercilessly crushing Lucas's axe-wielding hand beneath his heavy combat boot. The sickening crunch of fracturing bone echoed through the crypt. Miller leaned down, pressing the tip of his silver short sword dead against Lucas's throat, his eyes flashing with psychopathic malice. "You thought you were the hero of a fairy tale, Lucas? You're nothing but the perfect sacrificial catalyst to agitate this beast's celestial spirit before I rip her core out." "Lucas. No, please, just run." Up on the altar, Skylar screamed through a torrent of tears. Her amber eyes bore witness to the only human who had ever saved her life. Her mortal anchor being physically desecrated beneath the blade of her tormentor. The sheer agony and psychological fury instantly breached the operational thresholds of her suppressed supernatural biology. The raw, primordial love of the girl and the ancient wrath of the mythical deity detonated in tandem. The 4 ancient iron-barbed chains violently shattered into pieces under a colossal wave of psychic pressure erupting from Skylar's body. Her amber eyes no longer flashed with their usual glow. They ignited into a fierce, apocalyptic orange fire, utterly incinerating the shadows of the cathedral. The sanctuary collapsed. The absolute freezing power of the ultimate 9-tailed snow fox had officially and completely awakened. From behind Skylar's back, 9 gargantuan tails woven of pure glacial mist unfurled grandiosely, sweeping through the area, instantly flash freezing and detonating the 1,000-year-old stone architecture of the cathedral wherever they touched. In a fraction of a second, the temperature inside the crypt plummeted to hundreds of degrees below zero. Members of the Iron Order who failed to flee in time were instantly caught in the sub-zero shockwave, their bodies petrified into shimmering ice statues, permanently frozen in postures of sheer panic and terror. Sheriff Miller recoiled in absolute horror, raising his silver short sword to shield himself. But the howling blizzard tearing from Skylar's 9 tails slammed into him, shattering the mortal weapon into 100 jagged shards of glass-like debris. Glacial frost violently shackled his legs, dragging Miller down to the floor. He stared up at the majestic snow fox hovering amidst the raging storm, her eyes burning with apocalyptic amber fire. His lips trembled violently before he was turned into solid ice. The battle was over. The ancient cathedral was reduced to nothing but a desolate graveyard of ruins, buried beneath a dense layer of ice and snow. But the cost of violently forcing the liberation of her entire primordial power was catastrophic. Skylar's physical form began to blur, particles of glowing amber light bleeding from her skin, drifting erratically into the freezing air. The glacial ley line running directly beneath Blackwood was fracturing permanently, threatening to bury the entire town unless a divine entity voluntarily sacrificed themselves to stabilize the seal. Skylar, returning to her human form clad in her blood-stained white attire, slowly stepped over to Lucas, who lay exhausted on the frozen earth. She knelt beside him, gently cupping his bloodied face. Her amber eyes were now unnaturally tender, completely stripped of the world's deep-seated resentment. She slowly leaned down, touching her nose directly against Lucas's forehead. A brilliant fox crown insignia ignited on his brow before embedding deep into his consciousness, leaving behind a permanent vow of protection and a wave of eternal warmth surging through the hunter's body. "Thank you for saving me." "Once again, Lucas," Skylar whispered with a soft smile. A single, frozen tear rolled down her cheek, brushing against Lucas's face before she let go. Turning away, she lunged straight into the depths of the frozen abyss beneath the cathedral's ruins, utilizing her entire soul and physical vessel to mutate into a new, permanent seal, locking the gateway to the underworld shut. 5 years later, winter in Blackwood remained just as bitter, freezing, and isolated as it had always been. But there were no more mysterious disappearances of hunters, and no more dark shadows of the Iron Order. Sitting in the leather chair of the town's newly appointed sheriff was Lucas. He had grown into a weathered, rugged man, his jawline hardened by the elements, carrying a long, distinct scar across his right hand. Lucas stepped out of the station, standing completely alone at the edge of the old-growth pine forest on a silent winter night. He lit a cigarette, the white smoke exhaling and blending seamlessly into the midnight air. Pinned to the collar of his uniform was a shimmering silver fox fur brooch. In the far distance, atop the fog-shrouded glacial peaks, two familiar burning amber embers abruptly materialized in the dark. They blinked softly toward him for a fleeting second, then vanished into the vast, infinite wilderness. Lucas tracked the horizon, a calm, peaceful smile breaking across his lips. Tugging the brim of his hat down low, he murmured into the void, "It's a cold winter this year, Skylar." A tiny silver fox cub with piercing, brilliant amber eyes slowly steps out, tilting its head up to look at him. A mysterious whisper echoes through the howling wind, closing the curtains on the dark mysteries of the frozen town.